Alright guys, we did it. Another should you pull video before the banner. Hopefully enough time to give you guys the information you needed, but 1,600 of you voted and I was able to collect some comments, so thank you so much. You guys are awesome. Despite that, there is still a lot to talk about with this banner, and yeah, let's jump into it, shall we? Enjoy.
Let the lesson begin.
What's up guys, Akariss here, bringing another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Today's video is going to cover that new banner that's coming out tomorrow. And thankfully, this should you pull video, plus the community and what you guys have voted and commented before the banner drops should hopefully help out quite a few of you. Now, before we actually start this analysis video and all the stuff I've looked into for getting this done, I actually wanted to take a moment to try to understand the pronunciation of Idunn. I used to say Idunn, but apparently it comes from Norse mythology, and there is an Icelandic way to pronounce it correctly. So before I even jump into this video, I'm going to listen to the correct pronunciation and try to adapt it during this video. So please forgive me if I fail, but I think it's necessary, and maybe this is something more educational for even you guys to adapt if you want to. So let's listen to it right now.
Idunn.
One more time.
Idunn.
Idunn. Idunn. It's not th. It sounds like a do sound.
Idunn.
Idunn. Idunn. I'm gonna fail this one, but I'm gonna try to adapt it during this video, and maybe that'll help out some of you as well. But yeah, let's jump into the
Idunn.
analysis. So, Idunn is a bit interesting. If you wanted my opinion on the rest of the units on this banner, I did do my impressions and reactions on Kath, Hugh, and Nime in the impressions video right before this. So go check that out if you wanted to, but this video will strictly analyze Idunn and like what she brings to the table in terms of the metagame, and of course whole should you pull aspect of whether she's worth it and what you guys think overall. If you saw the entry, then you'll probably think that most people are skipping, but that could ultimately be because of the AHR coming up. That could be the Hero Fest running, the recent legendary banner. There's a lot of factors why people might not have orbs right now, so this might be the skip banner just because of that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Idunn here is a necessarily a bad unit, so I'm going to try to cover that in today's video. Before we begin, smash that like button and sub. Seriously, I've been noticing the thumbs up on a lot of the videos, such as the Deirdre Respond analysis, where there were a lot of them, and I'm going to continue trying to push those videos, even though they might not be as popular. But as long as I see the data that you guys appreciate some specific type of content, I'm going to keep trying to push that out. So again, do that part. It's F2P. It helps a lot. It really does give the reach to these videos. Sub if you haven't already. Still about 30% of you, almost 30 of you haven't subbed, so why not? I mean, you're going to learn something here if you enjoy this game like we do, or that I do. You do, hopefully, that's why you're here. And finally, if you want to see me here for years more to come, then consider maybe the Patreon in the description below, or even hit me up on Twitch. Prime subs there, or of course the YouTube join button is about as simple as it gets. Either way, that does help me stay here for years to come, and I'm going to continue providing this educational objective analysis the best I can. So yeah, let's do this. Starting off with the speculative stats. Unfortunately, we didn't get a confirmation on Idunn's stats before the banner dropped, and this is usually why I did the should you pull videos after the fact, because we didn't have that. But I'm gonna just make a couple of rational speculative guesses here, as educated as I can get, and my data to go on this is the HP stats here. As you can see here, we have Faye's HP stat and Roy's HP stat, and I checked Zephiel's as well, and on the image here you'll see that they are matching. And of course I'm also going to be basing it off of Idunn's older stat spreads on her other variants, and try to come up with a stat spread that's more recent due to those aspects. So hopefully I'm right, but if I'm wrong, the only thing that would make me change my analysis here would be if like Idunn was like all of a sudden 40 speed or something ridiculous, like a speed stacked dragon armor. That would definitely change how I approach my analysis here, but I don't think it'll be that. I'm sure she'll be a more bulk focused, defense heavy, res heavy type of unit, and that's what I expect here. So here's what I've come down to, and hopefully I'm right so that this doesn't die, the analysis doesn't die too quickly. So by modern stat spread, I would assume she has 40 attack, about the same speed as the other variants that she's running, and a very high, probably equal-ish defense res. If I'm off by a single point here or there, or even 2-3 points, it's not really going to change any of these builds or anything like that. So if you do watch this tomorrow or the day after, don't worry, it's still relevant as long as she's not like 40-50 speed or something ridiculous like that. However, I really doubt that'll be the case. So anyways, in terms of fodder, she does come with that new Wily Fighter and Sturdy Stance 3. So that's awesome. Keep in mind that if you're going to use her best seal is basically going to be Steady Breath Seal. There's really no competition there. She really does depend on that special acceleration to fire off that bonfire. So this slaying weapon, as you can see there, she really does need that. Otherwise, you likely will not hit the specials. And if you don't hit the specials, then you probably miss the kills. So that's important. A couple other things I wanted to mention before we jump into some of the more specific type builds that I could see her running is her comparisons, of course, to something like Brave Hector and maybe even other dragons or other armors in general. So I feel she is a solid alternative to Brave Hector. I don't think she's worse or necessarily better than Brave Hector. I think they both have some pros and cons. In this current meta, though, I think I would favor Idunn over Hector because there's a lot of wind sweep shenanigans in the game, such as Brave Alm making a pretty solid presence. But the thing with Idunn here is that she does beat Alm pretty decisively. Because of the fact that she doesn't care about wind sweep, she has a color advantage. She'll still get hurt by him because he has effective damage and true damage, but there's going to be ways to overcome that I'm going to share in the builds coming up, and she's going to tackle Brave Alm probably the best out of any armor really in the game. I don't think there's a better counter to her near save and the way you deal with Alm than her, which is kind of funny because Alm is traditionally a pretty solid near save armor ball buster, so her presence will definitely help there. Now, funny enough, the counter to the counter here would be Water Sweep Brave Alm, who then can run Wind Sweep and Water Sweep, so definitely a lot of back and forth there, but again, I do have even a solution to that approach. Now, if the meta does shift over to something like Water Sweep, or there's just more Fire Sweep shenanigans in general, then it's gonna hurt a little bit. I do feel like her stat spread will be fairly min-maxed, meaning because she's dumping a bit of speed to run defense and res, high defense and res, and high attack, this means that her build flexibility is pretty solid in whether you'd want to like super stack defense res, or just go for one-shots with something like her really great bulk. So flexible builds we'll see in a moment. However, the meta did have a couple of really solid green threats release in the form of like not Brave, but Dual Hinoka, Ninja Korin, and Dual Dogger, and unfortunately those all are gonna make using Idunn here pretty difficult depending on how you approach that, especially from far save. But for near save, she's probably in a solid spot. Far save would definitely be a bit harder. Another problem with her builds that you'll see in a moment is she really is missing either acceleration or DR, and there's not really a solid way to do both besides like Flane and Elamine, which of course will make solid partners. So if you're a user in like this budget build on Astro Season, then Flane or Elamine are great partners because you have your acceleration through the seal. So mixing and matching that with the right partners will make her a lot better. But anyways, let's jump into some builds here and explain what's happening here. In my opinion, one of the better budget builds is probably going to be using Dragon Wall if you're not using Wily Fighter, because with Dragon Wall you are giving her a solid DR like check that she's pretty much always going to win, and this helps a lot against someone like Brave Alm because he doesn't have a res stat. So if you run something like Dragon Wall, she's not going to care too much about that effective damage, and QR on her seal deals with that whole I don't have auto double. So acceleration, DR, and of course auto double. There's a lot of this like back and forth going on, and you really have to mix and match the right partners. So you do want acceleration support if you run her with that first build, such as Thor's Worldbreaker and Valoria, and I believe Dual Hilda can also work as well. So there's definitely those things to consider, but mixing and matching all these different effects is pretty important. If anything, I feel like the Wily fighters, like nullifying bonuses isn't too great. It's okay. It's pretty good against units who might be using stuff like bonus doubler, which you might encounter in stuff like Summoner Duels. But generally speaking, I do think that like Dragon Wall or stuff like Hardy Fighter and even Special Fighter might be better. So there's a lot of variations of the builds you could run here, and you probably should just make do with whatever fodder you have. As for, again, the second build here, we're going to have True DR. Now, I do think QR might be better than Steady Breath in the seal, but it really does depend on the partners or supports that you have with her. So if you don't have any Steady Breath support, then you probably should be running that Steady Breath seal. Another thing that I want to mention here is that all these builds are ARO, but realistically you can mix and match and run this on AR defense, and you could even run them in Summoner Duels, depending on the partners and, of course, what you're trying to counter. And this is the thing, you can't really cover all your matchups, but all these builds are going to be working in different cases. Now, what I feel is actually the ultimate version of Idunn, and this one is going to likely require merges and very high investment, is a speed-based one. Now, you might think this is a bit of a meme, but if you actually look at the weapon, it does reduce speed, and with Savvy Fighter being released recently, and what you can do with speed stacking, it's not actually impossible. You can definitely get these armors up to 50-60 speed pretty easily, and one of her biggest problems is that she doesn't have an auto double, or she doesn't have a way to like double naturally. So you can actually, and of course with acceleration and DR, the best way to get all these effects is to actually just speed stack her and run a null follow-up in the B. Well, we have that now. It's called Savvy Fighter. Savvy Fighter gives you DR, Savvy Fighter gives you null follow-up, and if you run the Darting Breath Seal, you now officially have every single effect that Idunn wants in her combat matchups, which is exactly this. Keep in mind though, it's still pretty weak to piercing DR effects, such as Deadeye. Thankfully, there aren't any super big green bow Deadeye threats or green lethality threats or something like that, but generally speaking, this is, in my opinion, the best version of her because it just makes her have everything. So you speed stack, you win those, you stop the auto doubles from your opponents, you don't have to deal with something like E-Tree, for example, because you just Savvy Fighter through that. You still get your acceleration through Darting Breath, but I do think this requires heavy merges and a high investment in the long term if you wanted to run that. Remember, weapon, speed -5. That helps quite a bit. Elamine provides speed, Plumeria provides speed, Peony provides speed. Peony has Flower of Joy. You can use drive speeds, join drive speeds on your allies, for example, and you really can speed stack quite a bit. In fact, Brave Hector running a speed build is not a meme, and it's actually quite good as well. So if you run into like the Water Sweep Brave Alms, then this is technically also an answer to that by speed stacking. So I do think it's the ultimate version, and it's going to be hard to achieve for many, but it's likely what I'd see as being one of the best things here. Now, of course, Far Save being compared to, of course, Ostian Counter, Brother, Brave Hector, there are the Far Save variants. I actually feel like the Far Save variants are weaker than the Near Save variants. I think she's better as a Near Save tank, just as how I feel about Brave Hector generally being better at Near Save, or at least he's better at Near Save without running Hardy Fighter. Hardy Fighter, Distant Counter, Ostian Counter is pretty much better in Brave Hector's position, and I feel that same way here with Idunn. And this is because, again, you can't really get all your effects in one. You're missing something. You're missing acceleration, auto double, or DR at the end of the day, and it's going to make some matchups just really wonky. One thing that I think I can appreciate is that her bulk should just be better than something like Brave Hector. So instead of relying on stuff like specials or DRs and whatnot, you can actually use Dragon Wall. You can have some really high res and defense and just stack your defense and res to such extremes that enemies just do literally very little to no damage. This is unfortunately a little bit of a problem because stuff like Ninjorin has true damage and that's going to hurt, but thankfully Dragon Wall does cut into that true damage and ends up being far less significant. So Either way, I do think she's quite powerful in both an air offense, air defense, Summoner Duels. She's just going to be a solid unit and a good alternative to Brave Hector. Honestly, if you don't have Brave Hector, then she's probably worth considering as a carry, if nothing else. But it depends. It definitely depends. If you don't have near saves at all, and you wanted to run the whole double save thing, or you wanted to run some range tank with near save support, then Idunn is going to be, in my opinion, one of the best units in the game for this particular role, especially in the current meta, if anything. So, yeah. Would I say she's a must-pull? No. Would I think she's really good? Yes. If you end up getting her, should you use her? Yes. Should you go out of your way to get her? Probably not. Especially with so many good banners lately in the form of Hero Fest with Plumeria, Dimitri being there, Bridal Catria, and the upcoming Hero Rises, which could very well have like 4 greens and some extremely good value to talk about. So anyways, let's jump into what the community thinks and how we approach that. Now, first of all, that is the result of your votes, just literally over 8 hours or so. So I do it 9 hours ago, as you can see. Thank you again for participating for those that did. And I did get quite a few comments as well that I could work from. Needless to say, most people are not really summoning here. And I think those that are sparking are probably doing it because they really like Binding Blade or those characters on here, which makes total sense. But yeah, I'd say most people are skipping, including me, and that's just because there's going to be better options coming up. Now, as for the reasoning, here's what you guys had to say. Starting with Darkholm here, who says, while Idunn seems like a standout unit, I feel that most players are in a phase where they need to save their orbs, especially considering how many good banners we had in early February, plus Hero Rises, likely being a great banner in the future. Congrats to Binding Blade enjoyers, though. So yeah, I feel like if anyone's summoning here, they probably really like Binding Blade, or they really want one of the best near save options, which she's going to be. Idunn, that is. Okay, next up is a comment by Mari/Kura, who says, I'm probably going to spark for Idunn, but that depends on if NY Dagger will make it into the AHR banner before after the first VG round. The reason why I've been thinking of investing into one of the Idunns anyway, regular spring, I didn't expect a new one to release, that apparently ends up being Magic Vector. Most likely won't go further than the Spark if that ever happens at all. Consider her a more or less long-term project for the future afterwards. If I don't go for the Spark because of NY Dogger, then it's just going to end up being all the blues on the free summon / ticket circles. This is actually a good point that reminds me that I am a Blue Dragon armor user. I use Far Save Tiki. And using Savvy Fighter on Tiki is probably one of her best builds. So one thing that I really appreciate out of using Legendary Tiki, so kind of a bit of a comparison here, is that Legendary Tiki does hit res and doesn't really fail to get kills. However, she does need to double in a lot of cases, whereas the weakness that I can see Ascended Idunn here having. And Magic Vector is a funny term because hitting res is more desirable in this game than hitting defense. And if she's a far save unit, then she's also likely doing adaptive damage, which is also a great benefit to her compared to someone like Vector who's hitting defense. And there's definitely notable scenarios where you want to be hitting res over defense, since most of the tanky units in this game have higher defense than res. So a good point here, and just something that reminded me. As for whether I feel like Ascended Idunn is better or worse than Tiki, it's not really that comparable. Idunn definitely would be the better near save, and Tiki has far save built in, so it goes without saying. Plus Tiki's distant counter weapon and availability on the day slot. So that's why that comparison wasn't really made in this video, but generally speaking, it is an interesting point. Okay, last up is Ritsu-chan, who says, honestly, if you don't have a nicely built Brave Hector, Ascended Idunn can kind of fulfill his role and even have access to other skills like Dragon Wall or Ire. I didn't talk about Dragon Ire or Wrath in this video, and I tried to think about whether they would be better than alternatives like the fighter skills or Dragon Wall, and I really didn't come to that conclusion. I feel like most fighter skills are going to be better, and the only viable like dragon skill to use is probably Wall, just because it's consistent high damage reduction, whereas Wrath and Ire are just kinda maybe not as good compared to other options. Anyways, definitely. So he or she says definitely worth a spark if you need a good save armor. If not, fodder definitely underwhelming. So it's looking like a skip for me. So yeah, as I said, one off or potentially picking up Idunn for free can definitely get you some value here, especially as a near save tank if you don't already have that. And I guess that pretty much concludes what we think here on this banner, guys. Looks like most of us are skipping, and for good reason. With Hero Rises coming up and the current Hero Fest still being active, there's probably better places to spend the orbs, and I'm sure this banner, or at least Ascended Idunn, will make a return at some point, and that might be your opportunity to consider her at that point, should the meta change a little bit. That covers everything in today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for participating in the poll, and thank you for being awesome as always. Smash that like button if you haven't already, and sub. I will see you guys very soon. Maybe come check me out on Twitch, as I likely will be playing some Aether Raids and Summoner Duels S after this video in particular. Love you all. See you soon. Peace.
It's over.